Welcome to Coping with COVID-19 by Crossroads Counseling. I'm Travis Fry, and today I'm joined by Deanna Moore and Michelle Huntley and Lauren Jack, all counselors here at Crossroads. And today, just in light of current world events and circumstances, we are going to be talking about grief, as we realize that many people are experiencing a loss of some kind and some sort. And loss doesn't have to be limited to the death of a loved one, someone that you really care about. Loss can take on many shapes and many forms, which we're going to discuss in this conversation today. But first, welcome everybody. It's good to have all of you here. And I just wanted to get things started by talking about grief. And what is grief?
Yeah, thank you, Travis, for doing this. I think it's so important because we are, we're all grieving something right now, like you said. We all have different versions of grief, and it can look different for everyone. For some people, it's the obvious. It's the loss of someone that we love. It's a loss of a job. It's a divorce. It's, even in what we're living in right now, it's the loss of our lifestyle. Grief can look like a lot of different things. Yeah.
So it's a normal response or a normal reaction to a loss. And that loss can really be anything, Lauren. What about others? In terms of grief, how would you describe it? And then also, what are some of the kind of normal responses or stages of grief for our listeners to be aware of?
So I think one of the things that can be so overwhelming about grief is that we're not really sure how to grieve or what's involved with grieving. I know a lot of my clients, they're so overwhelmed by their experience. So to know that there's kind of a framework or there are typical things, somewhat typical things that people experience can be so helpful. So there's this acronym DABDA, which stands for the stages of grief. And I find it so helpful to look at these stages as a way to kind of understand what's going on. So the first stage is denial, the D, denial and isolation. So I can't believe this happened. The next stage is anger. I relate to this one quite a bit. Oh, I can't believe this happened. I'm so angry. Ugh, how could you leave? How could I not be able to do what I want to do right now because of the pandemic? The next one is bargaining, so the B. And bargaining, some people, it can be a little confusing, like, what's bargaining? But it has to do with, for instance, in terms of loss of a loved one, if I had only done this, or maybe if I do this, then something could happen. It's engaging in those kind of what if scenarios. The next D is depression. And so that, that's that deep, deep sadness. Really like, sitting in the loss. And the final A of DABDA is acceptance. And that's this idea of I've accepted my new reality. The other thing that I like to talk about with my clients with these ideas of stages is that it's not a linear experience. It's not just a one and done, I've been in denial and I'm never going to be in denial again about this loss. You can jump from stage to stage. And the hope is you're recovering and healing from this grief, you'll land in acceptance more frequently and you'll stay there longer.
So just to kind of recap so far, grief is a normal response or reaction to a loss. And loss can be, it's so much broader than, a death of a loved one. It can be things that we're experiencing today, loss of freedom, right? Loss of hanging out with friends, loss of income, you know, going to the grocery store and having to put on a hazmat suit, you know, and, you know, there's loss all around. So it's a normal reaction and response to a loss and a change. And then Michelle, these stages that you're talking about, I think I got denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then acceptance. And I
Yes.
think you bring up a really important point that these are not linear stages. So, you know, I've passed the denial stage, checked that box, and now I'm in the anger stage. And I'm going to be angry now for, you know, however long that takes, and I'm going to check that box. I think what I'm hearing you say is that it can be a lot messier than that,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
like, what as someone who's grieving and going through that, I mean, what are you guys seeing with people out there that you're talking to? What are you noticing in terms of those stages? How are people really kind of processing through those stages and this big change that we're experiencing?
Well, I think a lot of what we're seeing, or just even what we're experiencing ourselves, are, you know, at any point being in one of those phases. And, you know, just like Michelle and you were saying, Travis, that it could look like 3 different stages in one day. So I wake up and I'm feeling okay about it. I feel in acceptance. You know, this is where we're at. And then by noon, I'm feeling pretty angry about everything that's happening. I'm lashing out at my partner, or I'm lashing out at my kids, lashing out with myself. And then I kind of drop into sadness. Later on, it's hard for me to kind of get out of bed. And so I think it can show up in so many ways. And I think that's why it's so important for us, you know, to put it out there, to link it to grief, you know, because it can feel so overwhelming. Like Michelle was saying, all the emotions are happening each day, and I have no idea what's going on, but to know, okay, you know, this is a form of grief. I'm suffering many different kinds of losses. We can pull back and really understand that we're going through these stages, that we're going through this process, and it's okay to grieve even if I haven't lost somebody, because we're grieving a different type of loss.
What about Lauren and Michelle? Like, what are you guys noticing in terms of grief and how people are just responding to this really big change that we're all in together?
You know, I had this really, I thought it was a pretty amazing experience. I was doing a workshop with a world-renowned grief and trauma expert last week. And he got on and he was starting off and he said, you know, I wasn't even sure if I was going to do this, because I just found out about an hour ago that my brother died. And right away, I noticed my reaction, which was uncomfortable and scared, and just sort of all of these feelings that I was having personally. And then, you know, he said, but I know that I need to be here. I know that I need to go through this. And he began to do what he starts off with, which is just some breathing, some diaphragmatic breathing. And I got to witness this man like unabashedly bawl his eyes out for the loss of just losing someone an hour ago. And in a few minutes later, he was laughing because he was remembering a beautiful memory of his brother. And then he shared afterwards that he was also so angry that this all ended so quickly. And what that brought for me was just that all of those emotions can simultaneously exist. Like, I can be, you know, grateful for some extra time off, but so scared that I could lose my job, or so afraid that, you know, all of these things can live together. And what we normally do is, I shouldn't feel this because, you know, this is going on, or why would I laugh at a time where other people are being so hurt? And just not judging ourselves for where we're at. And when we don't do that, when we don't judge ourselves, it has an opportunity to flow through us so that the next emotion can come through. And, you know, I just, that was just very powerful for me. I wanted to share that. And it felt like an honor to watch that.
That is very powerful. This, what I'm hearing from that, or a lot of things, but one in particular, is that he allowed himself to experience the emotions that he was feeling, and as he did that, it was allowing him to process through the pain and even get to a point of being able to have some positive or remembering his brother, Lauren. So this concept of allowing ourselves to experience what we're feeling, I think is huge. So with grief, we're talking about it as the normal reaction or normal response to a loss. When does grief become more problematic? When does it become more of an issue where someone should be concerned? Like, what are the signs and symptoms that they should be looking for that would indicate it's beyond a normal response or reaction?
So, I think, as you're saying, Travis, acknowledging that having a grief response to a loss is normal. So, so what that also means is that sometimes it's normal to have, bigger, longer periods of time, somewhat longer moments of feeling angry or feeling depressed. But when it starts to become when it starts to become longer, when you start to get stuck in those stages and not being able to move through them and not having moments of acceptance, especially if your basic biological functioning is getting altered, like your sleep schedule, you're not sleeping, or you're sleeping all day, or eating habits, you're not eating at all for days at a time, or you're completely overeating. Those are some signs that maybe the grief is getting to be too much. Maybe that's when you need to start looking for some outside support. And I guess the other thing I just want to add here is, even if you're not at that place where you need extra support for your grief, when we're going through the loss of something, we all need support. And so much of that support comes from the relationships we have, whether it's with family, friends, coworkers, our pets. Having that kind of connection is so important. And when we get to a place, if that isn't enough, or if we need, we're seeing the biological functioning disturbances, or we're getting stuck, that's really when we need to get more help.
So when a person's level of functioning is really negatively impacted, and they can look for, sleeping patterns, eating patterns, energy levels.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of different things. So that would indicate more of like this is moving beyond grief, more into like a depression, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Lauren, you were just talking about kind of allowing space for a person to feel their emotions, but then also what I heard from you that you observed as you were listening to this grief and trauma expert was this concept of it was having like self-compassion, and not really being harsh towards oneself. So, people who are grieving oftentimes, they have that harsh internal voice that says, "Hey, like, get over this. Hey, you gotta, keep going." And sometimes they hear that from other people too.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah, for the person who is grieving, and maybe you're a family member of someone who's grieving, what are good things to say, and what are not good things to say to them?
Yeah. I think that when we're in the presence of someone who's grieving, for myself, it's very uncomfortable. I want to be a cheerleader. I want to say, no, you've got this, or did you ever think about this? And it's probably one of the worst things we can do, although well-intended. It's about just being where you're at right now. I know, watching the expert, and then also a lot of my clients are saying, I shouldn't be feeling this way. At least I have a job. I shouldn't be doing this. And I'm really trying to slow things down and saying, but it is what you're feeling right now, and it's warranted. And there's no reason. And I love the word, Travis, self-compassion, because when we start doing that for ourselves like this, I'm feeling a lot right now, and that's okay. And because when we do that, then it has the ability to begin to transition and to begin to feel seen and heard. And so when we say, it's okay that I'm feeling like this right now, it's almost, I liken it to just kind of giving a little girl a hug who's scared or afraid, versus ignoring her and pretending like she's not there. And so that's what we would be doing to ourselves. So sitting down with someone who's grieving, and I've got you, I'm here, maybe not saying a word, which is very, very uncomfortable for a lot of us, I understand, but sometimes that's the best thing that we can possibly do. Does that answer your question, Travis?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What comes up for me is Brene Brown and her, the video she has on YouTube where the concept is about getting in the well with people.
Yeah.
And that means that you allow yourself to connect with their pain, allow yourself to feel some pain that you may have as well. And I find that, fewer words are better. And just being present and connected to someone who is grieving. People feel like, well, I'm really not doing anything. I got to I've got to bring a meal. I've got to say encouraging words. I've got to get them up and having fun. But this idea of just kind of sitting with somebody in the grief and the sadness and the loss, and being with them, being present with them, I think it's a big part of what actually helps a person to metabolize the experience and start to move forward.
Powerful. It's powerful. It
is powerful. So we're talking about the importance of community and connection. Michelle brought that up. And in addition to that, for others who are needing, what can I do right now? What are some other ideas that you guys have for the person who is grieving?
So there are, a number of things that a person can do. I think a thread that has been moving throughout this conversation is this idea of acceptance. Not just accepting and the new reality, but also accepting our experience in the moment where it's at. As Lauren was just so beautifully sharing about, the man who just embraced where he was at right there in that moment. And so I think it's that level of acceptance, it's a practice, and it's okay, I'm feeling sad right now. Okay, I'm feeling a little lonely right now, or whatever the emotion is, just giving yourself that permission to accept exactly where you're at, and then also I think, as just to reiterate, that reaching for connection when we can. And it could be something simple like sitting with a pet, sitting with a friend at a safe social distance, or, even this kind of what we're doing right now. Technology is so amazing. We can connect with people over our phones, over our computers. So, those are just, I think, two really simple things: acceptance and, reaching for connection.
And I would just add to that too, that's beautiful, Michelle. I have a tendency to just kind of go within, and I can figure it out on my own. And, what you were saying as far as reaching out to community, it was up until a couple of years ago, very foreign to me, but it's so healing, going to our faith, going to our spiritual whatever our spirituality may be, turning to other people. And then also, this gentleman also was talking about calming down the central nervous system as well too, by doing some of this deep diaphragmatic breathing. And what he recommends to do is to breathe in the word soft and breathe out the word belly. And what that does is it begins to, he calls it the antidote for the fight or flight response. So it doesn't heal it, it doesn't take it away, it doesn't bring them back, but it can calm the body down a little bit so it doesn't need to be habitually living in that fight or flight mode. And of course, your old-fashioned, you know, the exercise, if you have the energy to do so, and be gentle on yourself if you don't. The practice self-care, and this knowing that this will fade. You know, sometimes they say, you know, 12 to 24 months, and for some it's longer, for some it's shorter. And so just being gentle on yourself, knowing that, again, this is a universal process, but it will begin to soften if given some of these tools, if they're, you know, used appropriately. Yeah.
Dan, it looked like you wanted to say something.
Yes. I was just piggybacking on Lauren and Michelle. What came to my mind was just utilizing some of those mindfulness strategies to do exactly all those things, those great things that they're talking about, of being able to acknowledge, accept, and just notice. Something I talk a lot about with mindfulness is almost just imagining when you're doing any sort of meditation or practice that, you know, your thoughts are like a conveyor belt. You're just kind of going by and you're noticing them, acknowledging them. And an important piece of, we're not judging them. You know, whatever your experience is okay and valid. And even if that judgment comes up for you during the day and in those moments, just noticing that it's there and letting it pass by. And how important just to acknowledge your experience, whether it's mindfulness or journaling, taking that time to check in with yourself and lean into it in small moments throughout the day or the week, can be really helpful just to check in with yourself.
Great ideas for people who are experiencing this. And again, I just want to remind everyone that I think all of us to some degree are experiencing a loss. It does not have to be the death of a loved one. Our world is much different than it was just a few short weeks ago. And you know, as you are grieving, one thing for me, Lauren mentioned faith. You know, one thing for me as a Christian is this knowing that Jesus went through tremendous grief and through tremendous loss, and that he can absolutely identify and connect with the pain that I think for many Christians that they're going through and that they're feeling as well. So leaning into your faith, leaning into your community, allowing yourself to accept the reality and to feel the pain, being mindful and aware that if it moves into a place of darkness and isolation, if it's really impacting your ability to function, where you're showing signs of like severe depression, that would be a time to really reach out and seek professional help. But as we move towards closing here, just I want to give you guys any kind of final, an opportunity to share any kind of final thoughts or words with people who are hearing this message and really need some encouragement today. Maybe they need permission. Maybe they just need to know it's okay. It's okay to feel what they're feeling. Whatever is on your heart to share with them.
Yeah, I would just reiterate the fact that, Travis, like you just said, it's all okay. All of these feelings, all of these emotions are valid. And the greatest gift that we can give to ourselves is to just be easy on ourselves. No, it's not going to be there for forever, at least the intensity of it. And that, you know, we are, like you said, Travis, we're all in this together to some degree or another. Let's lean in on each other.
I guess the thing that's just coming up for me right now is remembering you're not alone. That can be one of the most difficult feelings that a person can experience, that feeling of being alone. But know that I for one can relate to that experience of feeling alone. But as we're here for you, and also just know too that us here at Crossroads, we're praying for you, and our hearts are with you.
And I would just say, as that, if this is something that you relate to, as that inner critic or that self-judger comes up for you today to say, my pain is not as great as their pain, or I shouldn't be feeling this way, to just kind of allow yourself to know that, everyone's pain is different, and, you are doing the very best that you can with where you're at right now, and lean in with your community. You're not alone. And just kind of noticing that for yourself today, to give yourself a little bit more compassion.
There is grace, there is empathy, and there is compassion. And that's still alive and well in this world, even with all of the other dark stuff that's going on. And so I hope you are encouraged by our conversation today. I hope it gave you some insight, but also just a deeper sense that you truly are not alone, that we're going to get through this together. Deanna, Michelle, and Lauren, thank you so much for being with me today. Appreciate your time and your expertise. And at the end of this video, our website and our phone number is available. If you are needing help, if you're concerned about a loved one, I just encourage you to reach out and give us a call. We're here, and we are offering video sessions just like what we're doing right now, telephone sessions, and we can be of service. So thank you again, and many blessings to you on this day.